Hello everybody, Wildman here with episode 5, which I'm calling Habitat Africa. I know, first of all, I want to say at the end of the last video, I mentioned that we would be talking about the pachyderms in this episode, but I decided to switch it up to Habitat Africa, which you'll see a little bit more later on in the video as far as an explanation goes as to why. So Habitat Africa is an area of the zoo that's been actually built for many years now, and it's in the kind of northwest corner of the zoo property, which we're zooming in on here as I talk to you about it. This area basically contains what I believe they call as ungulated animals, or animals with, I think that's two-toed hoofs, but I kind of call it the hooved animals, which include antelopes, giraffes, some of the cattle, and pigs and things like that. So basically that's what this entire area represents currently in the zoo. So historically in the zoo, if you look at this area, it was a couple of very large segmented areas with specific animals. You could see it says antelopes. The giraffes were kind of in a house in the middle with a couple of viewing areas, and there was an area that was called smaller antelopes. This area also included zebras and wild horses. So basically, like I said, all those kind of hooved animals that you typically might see in a savanna type part of Africa. Let's touch a little bit about what the exhibits looked like originally in the zoo. And typically, like old traditional zoos, there was a giraffe house or giraffe barn that was kind of in the middle of the enclosure area, and it basically was a place for the animals to go to for examinations and to get out of inclement weather, especially in the Chicago area in the winter. But the kind of sad part about this was the interior of this building were basically just huge, oversized barred cages for the giraffes. And again, not knocking the zoo. This is the way things just used to be. But on the outside, again, the animals kind of had just an open pasture. It was mostly dirt on the ground, wide open, not a lot of trees, not a lot of shade for the animals. It was very easy to see them, and they could come right up to the fences, but again, not really interactive for the animals themselves. The one other thing I just want to point out, as you've seen some of these pictures, is the giraffe barn had what I always liked is a beautiful mural painted on it to kind of give like a savanna type background. Even though it was just a mural painted on the building, it at least gave it some character, and it wasn't just like a plain beige or plain green structure. So then the zoo created what's called Habitat Africa, and it's really broken up into two sections: Habitat Africa, the savanna, and Habitat Africa, the forest. And what it basically does is it just kind of groups the animals together, whether they're more savanna or forest type dwelling animals. And the kind of neat thing they did about this is they made the exhibit, again, very interactive, more natural looking, and much more pleasing for not only the guests but for the animals living there. Generally the giraffe barn stayed where it was. They just added to it, and rebuilt it. I don't know if they tore it down and rebuilt it or just remodeled it, but basically they made the interior a little bit more, viewer friendly for the guests, a little bit less like a jail for the giraffes, because they do have to live indoors in this type of area of the country. But what they did is they hid the building underneath a design to make it look more natural. I may butcher the way this is pronounced, but I believe it's pronounced Cape or Cape. It's basically, the building's hidden under this like rocky outcrop like you would see out in the savannah. So it's just really cool how they did this. And in the interior of the building, there's a few smaller exhibits with a few small antelopes, I believe some lizards and snakes and things like that. Things that you would find living in and around a Cape. Here I go again. But anyway, it also houses, again, the winter quarters for the giraffes. The exterior viewing part for the giraffes is way nicer than it used to be. Like I mentioned earlier, it was kind of a big open dirt enclosure, where now it's more wooded, lots of shade trees. There's a beautiful little pond that separates the giraffes from the guests, and the guests actually view the giraffes from underneath a kind of like African safari like lodge type thing. So, it's got this log covering with the thatched roof, and you're in a nice shaded area where you could view the giraffes right across a small pond, and they actually get pretty close. Also around the perimeter viewing area, there's a number of smaller exhibits. Like there's a telescope that looks like a giraffe, where kids could kind of view them from the giraffe's eye level. And recently the zoo has also added a feature where you could, for a small additional fee, hand feed the giraffes over the fence of the outside perimeter. This area also includes a great viewing area for African wild dogs. There's an area where it's a covered glass viewing area, and you could kind of see the den and where the dogs are at rest. But they also have a huge open semi-wooded area to run around with alongside the giraffes. Now, while they're not mixed with the giraffes, and there's some very natural fencing that the zoo put in to physically keep them separated, from certain angles it actually looks like they're in the same enclosure. Later on, the zoo added the forest part of Habitat Africa, and what this is basically a showcase for the Opaki, and they're again a more wooded or forested living type environment for that antelope. And they kind of rebuilt the old enclosures, which were just basically big triangular chain link fenced areas, and made it a little bit better and themed as far as an African forest type environment. Again, there's some different animals on display here other than the Opaki, but this is primarily their area. The original antelope barn also has been reconfigured on the inside with some more detailed exhibits that include some smaller animals as well. Let's take a look now at what the future plan of this area of the zoo might look like. So just to kind of refresh, what we're talking about is kind of this area of the zoo right here, looking back at this original plot. Now I'm going to bring up the satellite view on top of this, and just to kind of give you an idea how things actually still line up. If you look right here, you can see that small antelope building's there, the giraffe building's here, and the Habitat Africa house forest part of the house is right here. And you could see that they're pretty much lined up with that original plot of the zoo very, very clearly. The pathing has changed a little bit, obviously, but for the most part, it's the same. Let's overlay it now with the future plan. And as you can see, as I start to fade in, once again, the buildings don't line up exactly just because of the size differences of these photos that I used. But for the most part, you could see that the giraffe building is still here. The Habitat Africa forest building is here. But there are a number of other changes that happen in this future plan. First of all, let's just kind of talk about the forest area, which is back over in here. Right now, the pathing in this area still pretty much follows an outside perimeter type path with access to the building for the interior exhibits. But as you could see on the future plan, the path follows a more random or wavy type path through the wooded area, and in the process it does pass through the building right here. The giraffe area looks to be about the same, and it even says, it's hard to read, but it says existing giraffe right here, and it also says existing wild dogs right here, which is where they are currently located. But one big change that you'll see in this area is there's kind of an unutilized section of the zoo right here. And this is going back to when we talked about the big cats, and the lions were not part of the future plan because it's going to be more of an Asia type setting over by those big cats, which was over here. And the lions will have their own dedicated, what looks like a Pride Rock type area with their own house, lion house, in this area. And you can see they've added a warthog exhibit to this part of the Africa section as well. One of the other major changes to the setup of this land is the pathing. So currently, and I'm going to go back to the satellite view right now where you could see some of the pathing overlaid. There's a straight path that goes right here through the zoo and then cuts into the Habitat Africa or giraffe section of the zoo. These here are like zebras and camel type exhibits, and then the giraffe path continues on into the Great Bear Wilderness, but it's again hard to see underneath the trees. But there is a path that goes around through the forest part of Habitat Africa. But there are also some paths that still cut through this side of the giraffe exhibit and connect back, that also connect to be able to see some of these smaller Africa exhibits in this section of the park. One of the major changes is that this whole Habitat Africa is now being called the Savannah Safari. So there's only going to be one way into this current area, and that will come from right about here. And as you can see, the path comes in, goes to the giraffes or goes to the forest area, and continues in through the exhibits from this side. Now, there's a whole pachyderm and other changes that are happening right here, but we're going to kind of look over those right now because we will talk about those in the next episode. But just wanted to point out one other pathing changes right here. It's hard to read, but it says seating. So this is a little central area with some rocks and what looks like maybe a little waterfall or fountain type of scenery there that gives you the opportunity, it shows, to see elephants, see the giraffes, see the wild dogs, and whatever else is over here. I think that's going to be elephants as well. So as you can see, there's like a central viewing pathway set up instead of straight pathways or